Hi, everybody, and welcome to Chamber University. This program is brought to us and to you by Shakely and Perry ProTech. And we have a wonderful guest with us today. Her name is Aimee Bucher. She is with Harrison Latham, and she is going to talk about employee happiness in the workplace. And we're very excited to have her in this topic here today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Aimee. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and I will be here to help facilitate that. And you will get information on how to get it to Aimee later after the presentation. And I will go ahead and take it away, Aimee.
All right. Thanks so much, Nicole. Thanks, everyone, for having me here today. And as Nicole said, if you have questions as we're going along, throw them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll answer those at the end. So I want to talk about what actually happens when a company focuses on employee happiness, and why does happiness even matter in business? So let's imagine a scenario we're all familiar with. So picture walking into work on a typical Monday morning. What's the general mood? Likely everybody's tired, a little sad that the weekend is over. Everyone's maybe a little stressed. Maybe you're walking in knowing just how many emails are waiting in your inbox. You know, the day has barely started and you feel like you're already behind for the week. In most organizations, Monday morning does not feel like a happy time. Now, if you'll indulge me, let's rewind and imagine the scenario again, but I want to change it up just a little bit. You walk into work on a Monday morning and every person, including you, is genuinely happy to be there. Every person is excited about the work they're going to get to do that day. Everyone is looking forward to seeing and interacting with their colleagues. People are happy and eager to get the day going. Imagine if Mondays at 8 a.m. had that same happy energy as Fridays at 5 p.m. How would that change the company? How would productivity be different? What would engagement levels be like? What would happen in various departments, like say sales? So here's the cool thing is we have data that answers all of those questions. We have data that tells us what's different in a happy company and how happiness affects all the various parts of an organization. When employees are happy, productivity increases. Happy people work harder. When employees are happy, task accuracy increases. Happy people take pride in their work. When employees are happy, profitability increases. Happy people believe in the purpose of the organization and they drive it forward. And happy people sell more, a lot more. What could your company do with a 37% increase in sales? Herb Kelleher founded Southwest Airlines in 1967 and was the CEO for over 30 years. His vision for the company was simple. Employees come first because happy employees do better work. And that makes better work makes the customers happy because they get great service. And that makes the stakeholders happy because the customers keep coming back and the company makes more money. Until the pandemic hobbled the entire industry, Southwest was the only major airline in the world to have turned a profit every year since the 1970s. And as the entire travel industry is continuing to struggle coming out of this pandemic, Southwest has continued to fare better than all the other major airlines. And why is that? Their committed focus to their employees, the vision that employee happiness is job number one. Happy employees do better work creates happier customers create more profit for the company, which in turn creates happier stakeholders. The strength of the Southwest Airlines vision is carrying them through this crisis, and they will undoubtedly come out successful on the other side. And their customers and the industry continue to recognize just how powerful this focus on employee happiness truly is. So what is happiness? How do you define it? For a lot of people, happiness feels like this kind of fluffy concept that's hard to really wrap your head around and clearly define. And I want you to know, if you're feeling that way, you're not alone. So I'm currently writing my next book on systemic happiness, and I've been interviewing experts from all over the world, and it's just fascinating. So these are people who spend all of their working hours studying, researching, understanding the science of happiness and how we create more of it in the world. And in the interviews, I ask every one of them the same question: how do you define happiness? And this group of incredibly intelligent global researchers do not agree on a definition. They each give a different answer to the seemingly simple question. So if you don't feel like you quite understand how to define happiness, you're in really good company. But I do want to share a definition that we can use for our purposes today, because when I talk about happiness, I'm not talking about those fleeting types of happiness that we all experience, that feeling that you get when something good happens to you. For example, you play with a puppy and you feel happy, or you have a great meal at your favorite restaurant and you feel happy. Those moments of externally produced happiness are absolutely important for our well-being, and I'm not dismissing their value. But for today, we're talking about the happiness that you create within yourself and then within your organization. Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky is a professor at the University of California. She spent almost all of her career studying happiness and is considered one of the world's leading experts in happiness research. We're going to start with her definition of personal happiness, and I'd like to read it to you. Happiness is defined as the experience of joy, contentment, or positive well-being combined with a sense that one's life is good, meaningful, and worthwhile. This is a great definition for personal happiness, but what does it mean in an organizational setting? How does this definition apply systemically? So we can use Dr. Lyubomirsky's personal definition of happiness to create a systemic organizational definition of happiness this way. Happiness in its most basic form feels good. It's pleasurable. We enjoy it. A strong signal that an organization is happy is you can observe it. You can easily see that people are happy. They enjoy their work. They feel good about their work. We're all driven by some purpose. Every person wants to feel as though they are part of something bigger and more important than just their daily tasks of life. Organizations are happy when employees not only understand that bigger purpose behind their work, but they also truly believe in it. So our definition today of organizational happiness is a happy organization is one where people feel good about themselves and their work, and all employees believe their work has purpose and meaning beyond the bottom line. Okay, great. So how in the world do we achieve organizational happiness? How do we create systemic happiness in our companies? You might be asking, where would I even start? So I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do immediately to start leading your organization in a happier direction. And we're going to use the acronym MAT, M-A-T, to identify these 3 things. So think of it like a welcome mat. Welcome to a happier organization. So the M stands for measure the data. You measure everything in your company because it's important to know what's working and what's not. And happiness is no different. But this step of measuring happiness is typically a huge block for an organization. It tends to trip up even the most seasoned leaders because how do you measure happiness? Like what does that even look like? So maybe you do an annual engagement survey, or maybe you just go with your gut feeling in a smaller team about how everyone's doing. The problem with annual surveys is they're only once a year. And as we saw in 2020, a lot can change in a single year. And your gut feeling, your intuition, that's important and it is valuable, but actual data will give you a complete, unbiased picture. You need access to objective data that shows how your people are doing. You need to be able to quickly and clearly see the emotional health and happiness of your people. You need data that can be segmented so you can track patterns in teams and locations or across departments. Unfortunately, we have the technology to do this. 2 of my favorite tools out there are Friday Pulse and Heart Count. Now, they're not identical tools, but they have some key similarities. Both are based on the foundational idea of a simple weekly automated check-in with every employee. So both provide dashboards so you can see at a glance how each person, team, department, the entire organization is doing over time. So the actual tracking of the data, the measuring of the data, it's not that hard. We actually have these tools that make it pretty simple. And I spoke with Nick Marks at Friday Pulse not too long ago, and they now have this free personal version called Friday One. If you're curious about the actual items that are measured in a happiness assessment, I encourage you to go there, fridaypulse.com/the-happiness-test, and it has the same 5 things that are measured along with all the same concepts behind Friday Pulse. Now, when we measure organizational happiness, here's a caveat. I don't want you to measure the data, and I don't want you to track the happiness of your employees unless you're going to do something with that data. If you're not going to take action on the results, don't measure anything. So we've all done the engagement surveys that are reported in the big meeting to upper management, then get shoved in a filing cabinet somewhere and are never seen again, right? And how do employees feel about that? Not so great. Same thing with happiness data. Getting input from your employees and then ignoring that input will create unhappiness. And that's the opposite direction of where we're trying to go. So once you have that data, you need to take action on it. And like the measurement, taking action doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be some new fancy program or involved system for improving things. At the baseline foundational level, you can simply use the results as conversation starters. During a weekly huddle, a manager can say to his team something like, "Hey, our team's happiness level took a dip last week. Let's talk about why that is and see what we can address." Maybe team members had unclear instructions on a new project and they were frustrated, or maybe there was an unhappy customer who made everybody's lives miserable. There are things that you can often address to increase your team's overall happiness. There might not be things you can address, though. If someone has a crisis happening at home, someone died, their spouse lost their job, there are a lot of factors, especially right now, that affect us emotionally, and all of that shows up at work. But simply communicating and asking the question opens the door for your people to know they're being heard, to know the organization values them, which in turn helps them to be their best selves at work, which ultimately makes them happier. So measure the data, get that continual objective information on how happy your people are, and then make sure you're taking ongoing action on those results. Time abundance is the new rich. Feeling like we have free time or even just enough time to get everything done is one of the keys to creating happiness. Now, sometimes a team or an entire organization could be under a tight deadline, or like our healthcare systems in 2020, just in crisis, and having an abundance of time just simply isn't possible. But if that's the regular expectation, if your employees are constantly working against the clock, you're going to have unhappy, burned out employees and probably a high turnover rate that's costing the organization a lot of money. And the fact of the matter is we just aren't our best selves when we are time stressed. There's a famous study by Darley and Batson, completed in 1973, but still really relevant today. In this study, Princeton Theological Seminary students were presented with a staged Good Samaritan scenario. Now, the Good Samaritan is the story of a man who was attacked and left for dead on the side of the road. And in the story, people who thought they were too important or too busy, they just passed by the injured man and they didn't stop to help him. The guy who finally stopped and helped was from Samaria. He's the Good Samaritan. That's the name for the story. Now, this is a story any seminary student would be very familiar with. In the study, each student was told they needed to give a talk about the Good Samaritan story. And they were told they were either late and they had to hurry to get to the place where they would be speaking, or they had plenty of time to get there. On their way, the students encountered this staged scenario. There was a man slumped in the doorway. He's coughing, he's moaning, he's in obvious distress. It's very clear that he needs medical attention and help. Now, did the students stop to help? Did they take on the role of the Good Samaritan, the story they're thinking about, the story they're on their way to talk about? The researchers found that in the group of students who were told they had to hurry, only 10% stopped to help the man. And some of the students literally stepped over the guy on their way to the next building. Now, in the follow-up with the students, the researchers found that the 90% who didn't stop, they felt terrible about not stopping to help. It wasn't that they didn't notice the man. It wasn't that they didn't care. It wasn't that they didn't feel this pull of compassion to stop and help this man in distress. They felt like they didn't have the time. When we feel like we don't have enough time, we are much less likely to act in accordance with our values. Your employees want to do their best work. They care about their work, but when they feel time stressed, they are not bringing their best selves to work. They're going to get the job done, but not to the best of their abilities. So remember the stat earlier about the accuracy of tasks? Happy employees are 19% more accurate at their tasks. Allowing time, giving people an abundance of time helps them to do their best work and to bring their prime skills and values to their work. When you allow time, it creates space for your people to be happier. How is company culture communicated? It's through the stories that get told. Now, here's the thing. Stories are being told. Your organization's culture is being shaped every single day. Possibly right now in this moment, somewhere, a story is being shared. Now, if you're not actively telling the right stories, you're missing a huge opportunity to move the company to a happier place. So as humans, we are naturally biased toward the negative. It's a survival mechanism built into our lizard brain. We share negative news and stories much more easily than we share positive news and stories. It's just how humans are wired. As a leader, you have to intentionally tell those stories that shape the narrative you want for the organization, the stories that showcase your culture and beliefs in action, the stories that push the company in the direction of happiness. And you have plenty of these stories, but they're not going to circulate without intention. The bad stories, they're just going to spread themselves everywhere. But the good stories are going to stay here in the background unless they are actively, intentionally told and shared. Do you want to tell those stories that show how your company demonstrates its values? You want to tell the stories that praise your employees. You want to tell the stories that reinforce your vision, because aligning with vision is part of increasing systemic happiness. Alex Karoof is the founder and former CEO of Woohoo Inc. It's the Danish company that created Heart Count. That's one of those measurement tools we talked about earlier. He shared this story with me recently. A friend of his is the HR manager of another company in Denmark, and one of their company values is respect. Now, an employee who was not of Danish origin had been with a client and was treated really badly. The client was actually openly racist toward the employee. So the employee finishes up the job and he gets back to the office. And when he gets there, he goes to Alex's friend, the HR manager, tells him what happened. HR manager takes it to the CEO. And the CEO, what does he do? Calls the client and he fires them, terminates the contract on the spot. He says, this is not how we treat people. We treat people with respect, and we expect the same from our clients. Your contract with us is canceled. Click. Instead of the organization just having a sign on the wall that says respect is one of our core values, and then, expecting people to know it and believe it, the value was actively engaged, and they told that story throughout the company. They aligned their company value with a story of actually implementing that value. Can you imagine being an employee at that company and hearing that story as it circulated? Those employees have a new example, a narrative that provides concrete evidence of how the company respects and values them. They can now reference that story as an example of how the organization truly aligns with their values and puts employees first. Zappos is a fascinating company from several aspects. So they define their culture in these 10 core values that are really different from other companies' core values. And these are action statements. There are verbs in here. And they take these values so seriously. They celebrate their values. Every hire is based on how well the prospect displays and lives these values. This first one, deliver wow through service, is apparent in every single thing they do. Now, if you don't know, Zappos is an online shoe retailer, but they will tell you they are a customer service company, and they just happen to sell shoes. Now, if you get hired into Zappos, no matter what role you're hired into, you start by answering phones in the call center. They believe every employee needs to be intimately familiar with the customer process. And during the busy seasons, every person at the company, from the CEO on down, signs up for shifts to answer phones. They believe how they serve their customers is the most important thing they do. And they are serious about delivering wow. Now, traditional call centers use a metric called average handle time as a way to measure efficiency. So industry standard average handle time is 6 minutes and 10 seconds. But efficient handle time and wow don't necessarily go hand in hand. Zappos doesn't just encourage longer customer calls, they celebrate their longest calls. In 2011, their longest call was 8 hours and 47 minutes. And the whole company celebrated when they broke that record the next year. And in 2016, the record was broken again with a call that lasted 10 hours and 43 minutes. That 2016 call started when a college student from here in the Midwest called to buy a pair of boots. She and the sales rep got to chatting as they squared away the order. So Stephen Weinstein, the Zappos customer service rep, said, "It was excellent. The connection was amazing. And even though I never spoke to this customer before in my life, I felt like I had known her for 15 or 20 years. It was just natural and time was flowing. It just felt effortless." They talked about all sorts of things through that almost 11 hours they were on the phone together. Life, movies, favorite foods. The college student was considering moving to Vegas, so they talked about what it was like to live there. The actual purchase of the boots was just a tiny part of that phone call. And a company spokesperson said, "Sometimes people just call and need to talk. We don't judge. We just want to help." Every employee at Zappos knows the stories of these 10-hour plus phone calls. And whenever the record is broken, the whole company celebrates. They know they are delivering the wow that they talk about in that first core value. They are fully aligned with their values, and they tell those stories all the time. Telling the stories is one way an organization creates happiness and builds a place where people want to stay and work hard because employees are hearing the stories of their purpose and of their value. Southwest Airlines has imbued every part of their company culture with an intentional focus on happiness of their employees, their customers, and their stakeholders. And beyond the impact on the bottom line, there are thousands of stories demonstrating the power of this focus on employee happiness. One of my favorites of these stories is from 2011. A grandmother called Southwest Airlines to arrange a flight for her husband. She explained what was going on to the ticketing agent, and the agent struggled with tears throughout the whole transaction. You see, the grandfather was traveling from LA to Denver for the most tragic reason you can imagine. His 3-year-old grandson had been murdered. The woman explained she was the step grandma, so it was so much more important that the grandfather get there in time to be with his daughter when her child, his grandchild, was taken off life support that night at 9 p.m. The grandfather gets to LAX just as soon as his ticket is arranged, but the lines were endlessly long. He's on the verge of tears. He's trying to explain the situation and get assistance from TSA, but it's TSA. Nobody cared. No one was willing to listen to the man's story and get him through the lines faster. Finally, he gets through security. He grabs his shoes and belt as soon as the bin comes down the conveyor belt, and he runs to the gate in his stocking feet. He knew he was too late. He knew he had missed his flight. He knew he was not going to make it in time to be there with his daughter that night. But he runs anyway, because what are you going to do? But as he approached the gate, he saw a pilot standing there. And upon seeing the grandfather running toward him, the pilot cried out, "Are you Mark? We held the plane for you. We're so sorry about the loss of your grandson." The grandfather's in complete disbelief. Are you serious? You held the plane for me? I can't thank you enough for this. And the pilot responded, he said, "They can't go anywhere without me. And when I heard your story, I knew I was not going anywhere without you. Now relax, we're going to get you there. And again, I'm so sorry." Now, plane delays can be pretty expensive for an airline, right? So how did Southwest respond when they learned what the pilot had done? What did they say when they found out he had intentionally delayed a flight full of people for a single passenger? Their spokeswoman said this: "I think we would all agree that the pilot absolutely made the right decision. I don't think you could ask for a better example of great service for our customers." Now, perhaps shifting your culture won't have such a dramatic impact as that of a grandfather holding his dying grandson's hand. Do you think Herb Kelleher had any idea back in 1967 that he was paving the way for that grandfather to be there with his daughter and grandson that night? No. Herb Kelleher had the vision that creating a culture focused on employee happiness was good for the company. What we understand now is that creating a culture focused on employee happiness is good for humanity. Thank you. Nicole, do we have anybody with questions?
Currently, we haven't seen anything in the chat box. Aimee, thank you so much for your presentation today. I learned quite a bit. This is how you can get in touch with Aimee if you would like to speak with her on a one-on-one basis. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat box now. Otherwise, you will receive a copy of this recording and also Aimee's contact information. And Aimee, I know that you're all over social. You also have a website where they can contact you as well. What is your, I apologize, is it harrisonlatham.com?
Yes.
Wonderful, yep. Thank you. Now we do have some things coming in the chat box. We're hearing a great presentation. Thank you, wonderful presentation. So with that being said, I don't believe anybody has any questions at this time, but I'm sure they will pop up later. With all the information that we just received, I think that for me, my brain is kind of going all over the place, and I would like to come back. I'm sure that I'll have, it's great information, and I'm sure that I'll have questions at a later time. So
Yes,
thank you everybody for being here. Thank you Shakely and Perry ProTech for bringing this program to us, and thank you Aimee for being our presenter this month. And I look forward to talking to to you again soon. So have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.